For the latest, we on the line now to Israeli-American activist Miko Peled, who speaks to us about an update on the ground. A very good evening to you, Miko. Thank you so much for speaking to us. So far, is the ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip holding?
Well, so far it seems to be holding. I think that I have to say, in response to the opening of the segment, some of the terminology I take some issue with. Calling the Palestinian resistance groups militants and terrorists, I think is misguided. It's not a conflict. This is a massive, unprecedented, unwarranted assault by Israel against the civilian population for nothing more than the purpose of gaining votes. Israel is up for election soon, and the Israeli Prime Minister wanted to show that he has what it takes to punish the people of Gaza, and he's done this very effectively. Also, I just want to say, Gilad Erdan, the Israeli envoy to the United Nations, is a war criminal and a liar. Israel was targeting houses, Israel was targeting apartments, Israel was targeting civilians. And as we see from the results, many of the deaths are deaths of children, many of the injured are children. This is a war crime of the worst kind. And I'm here in Jerusalem right now, maybe, less than an hour's drive from Gaza, and it is quite horrifying. But back to your question, yes, the ceasefire seems to be holding.
And I appreciate you're putting that perspective through that the doctrine of war actually, dictates the language that is used to portray the narrative. And sometimes we do ask questions like, who was the aggressor? The reports that we are getting, though, can you just explain a little bit more that what became first? Was it an Israeli military operation seeking certain members of a political grouping, or was it there were airstrikes into Israel? And how important is that?
Well, I think if we want to see, if we want to go back, we need to go back historically. The Gaza Strip was established by Israel as a massive prison, as a concentration camp for Palestinian refugees in the early 1950s. And ever since Israel established that prison, it's been bombing and killing and massacring civilians who are mostly poor, hungry, homeless refugees. Over the decades, between the 1950s and today, of course, the Israeli striking power has increased, their ability to kill has increased. Instead of killing dozens, they're killing thousands or hundreds. And so whenever we see the violence flare, we need to put that in that perspective. The Palestinians are fighting for their rights. They are fighting for their independence. They are fighting for their freedom. Of course, no one knows what it means to fight for their freedom more than the people of South Africa. Black South Africans have done this heroically for decades, and the people of Gaza. And it's interesting because the apartheid regime in South Africa and the apartheid regime in Palestine, which is known as Israel, were established around the same time, 1947, 1948. Thankfully, the apartheid in South Africa has fallen. We still need to see the apartheid in Palestine, again, which is known as Israel, fall. But the violence is always initiated by Israel. It is caused by Israel. Israel is absolutely to blame 100% of the time. The fact that they claim that they're targeting what they call terrorists is because in the eyes of Israel, Palestinians who stand up and Palestinians who dare to fight and Palestinians who dare to claim that they have rights are terrorists. And that is the language that is used by Israel. And I think it's incumbent upon us to challenge that.
Okay. There was the arrest of Bassem Saadi. I want to understand the connection between that and Israel targeting the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and its members. And the targets itself, was it certain that there would be no civilian casualties?
Yes, well, to bomb Gaza and expect no civilian casualties is absurd, because Gaza is jam-packed. It's one of the most densely populated in the place in the world, and Palestinians have never had a military force, so there are only civilians and small groups of resistance fighters that try from time to time to engage in in military resistance. But to bomb Gaza and not kill civilians is impossible. And Israel knows it very well. And they know very well that they were bombing and killing children, and they know that they did it by design. You know, if they bomb a building once and civilians are killed, then you say, fine, maybe that was an accident, maybe collateral damage. If they do it twice or three times, you know, you start thinking about it. If they do it consistently and constantly and systematically for 7 decades, then you know this is more than that. Then I think it's safe to call it genocide, or at least attempted genocide. The arrest, I think what Israel was hoping was that the arrest of the Islamic Jihad leader in Jenin would instigate the Palestinians to rise and shoot and so forth, which they didn't do. So Israel just went ahead and bombed Gaza on its own. And again, this is clearly, and when you look at the Israeli papers, by the way, they don't even hide this. They did polling immediately as the ceasefire came into effect, to see how the Israeli prime minister gained, how many votes he gained, and what the political map looks like now in light of this massacre, this massive assault against people in Gaza. This is a language that is used by the Israeli press. It's used by Israel and Israelis, you know, without any shame. This is what they're talking about, how this so-called operation, which is really an assault and a massacre, helped the Israeli politicians. It's in the front page of the Israeli papers. They're not, and on the Israeli TV stations as well. They're not even embarrassed to make that, to talk about this.
Well, the Palestinians, particularly through the spokesman of the Israel Defense Forces, General Kochav, says there were 1,100 projectiles that were fired from the Gaza Strip during the flare-up, with only 200 landing inside Gaza. And some have even reported that they were responding to these missiles. How does this influence how we as the world and those within the Middle East view what is going on at the moment? And I say this against the backdrop that this ceasefire itself was brokered by Egypt. It is understood that Iran itself backs the PIJ. How does it influence the context and how we understand what is continuing to happen?
Well, we're going to see more of the same. We're going to see Israeli assault against Gaza. We're going to see Israeli assaults against Palestinians in Jenin. We're going to see Israeli home demolitions and arrests of Palestinians throughout all of Palestine, until such time as the world decides to impose sanctions against the State of Israel. The State of Israel is engaged in a massive war crime. And we see outbursts, from time to time, but Israel is basically engaged in a horrific war crime, and there need to be severe sanctions against the State of Israel. All trade must be put on hold with Israel. Certainly military trade must be put on hold against the State of Israel. Israel needs to be treated precisely the way apartheid South Africa was treated before apartheid fell. It is the only way that we will see any kind of change. It's the only way that Palestinians will be able to live safely and securely, which, by the way, there are no guarantees for their life. I mean, we all remember not long ago, well-known Palestinian journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was assassinated. No one was protecting her. No one is protecting Palestinian activists. Nobody's protecting Palestinian in the Gaza Strip. And by the way, out of the 2 million people who live in the Gaza Strip, more than half are children under the age of 18. Who is protecting them? Who is taking care of their security? And that is really the conversation that should be taking place within the Arab world, within the Muslim world, and within the world at large. We need to be able to stand in the midst and to protect and to provide some security for Palestinians. There is no such conversation taking place anywhere. And until such time that that the world imposes severe sanctions against the State of Israel, we're not going to see any change. There will be no one standing and protecting the Palestinians. And I think that should be the bottom line. Sanctions against Israel and immediate protection, and of course aid for the people to the people in Gaza.
All right, thank you so much for speaking to us, Miko Peled. He is an Israeli-American journalist speaking to us about the latest in the Middle East. And of course, we'll bring you up to speed on those developments at the United Nations as they hold that emergency session.